Let's bring the Senate Health and Human Services Committee to order, and we have our quorum of 7, so don't want to lose that. And we have one bill here that we actually have already heard, but it was changed from, it's listed here as resolution, but it's changed from a to a study committee. It was, hold on just a second. All right, just clarification, I was not thinking clearly. So it was changed from a urging resolution to a study committee, and it's still listed as resolution, so this will be a substitute. And I think in everybody's folder is LC 550039S. And Senator Merritt, if you can get at the podium or down front witness, whichever you feel more comfortable, your decision. Okay.
Good morning, members. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As was stated before, I brought this to you, I think about a week ago, as an urgent resolution to explore insulin manufacturing here in the state of Georgia. Now have a substitute to create a study committee to further look into insulin manufacturing in Georgia and improving access to affordable insulin here in the state. Good for business, good for universities, good for state employees, good for diabetes patients. And if you guys will all look, everyone will look, you have a support letter from Veronica De La Garza from the American Diabetes Association, and just asking for your favorable consideration today.
Thank you very much, Senator Merritt. Just FYI, so everybody's on the same page. So type 1 diabetes, about 10%, maybe 20% of the number of people who have diabetes, and type 2, which there is a blurring there, because generally after 10 to 15 years or so, the pancreas is sort of pooped out. When we make the diagnosis of diabetes in type 2 diabetes, about 50% of the islet cells in the pancreas, those are the cells in the pancreas that produce insulin. So at 50%, they're gone, and that's why your blood sugars generally are higher. It is the toxicity that we think relating to diabetes, relating to blood sugars that attach to the proteins in the body, and that's how we measure the hemoglobin A1C. And that's the part of the hemoglobin molecule that has the glucose attached to it. So glucose attaches to proteins in our body, and that's the thought process is that's one of the ways it does damage to the kidneys, the eyes, the vessels, and so forth. And it is just a piece of the puzzle when it comes to that. So we measure the control of diabetes by the A1C, and the A1C, we wanted a goal of 6.9 or less. And in some folks, that's not achievable. Sometimes we'll set a goal of a 90-year-old person of 8.0, maybe even a little bit higher, because sometimes low blood sugars can be a danger. But generally, the lower A1C, the better. And that's what we're measuring with that is the glucose attached to the hemoglobin molecule and how much the percentage of saturation related to those sites is something that's helped revolutionize diabetes, along with recent drugs like the metformin was the original drug that's generic, everybody knows about, and the GLP-1s like the Ozempics and those drugs that Kim Kardashian and Elon Musk made popular and made my diabetic patients have a tough time getting those drugs. I'm not a big fan of Kim Kardashian. I would suspect that she made some money on that particular deal, and she deprived my diabetic patients of GLP-1. But I must applaud her in that she did get people aware that this drug is available. It is associated with weight loss. That's one of the 8 things or so that it does related to diabetes that are really good.
And I just wanted to add, Mr. Chairman, if I may, and I'm not a doctor or medical field of any way, but I do have a family with a history of diabetes. My great-grandmother lost her leg, and this was, my great-grandmother, we're talking like 1940s when she probably did not have insulin available. And then my grandmother, her daughter, insulin dependent. My grandmother, as long as I've known her, I always knew her to having to control her insulin and take shots. And now my mother is diabetic. She doesn't have to take insulin shots yet, but just trying to walk you guys through a history here. thank God, knock on wood, I have not been diagnosed with diabetes, and I prayed that it won't happen to me. I try to exercise and do the right dietary things, but have friends as well that are insulin dependent, have had to leave the state because of the cost. So I'm just working to help people, and I think this is a step forward.
So we got to applaud you for making that effort, and of course your genetics increase your risk, so that's ever so important to be aware of. We have a Chairman Kirkpatrick, who did bring an article actually from February 21st, 2023, so sort of hot off the presses, from JAMA, Journal of American Medical Association, and she has the article. I'm going to let her talk about it, but I think it's a great article. I was not aware of this going on, but maybe we can work.
Yeah, thank you, Senator Merritt. I apologize for not getting this to you sooner, but I just read it yesterday. So here's my concern. I think we may be getting ahead of our skis on this, and the reason is that California is the first state to even attempt to manufacture insulin in the state. I totally agree with you that we need to be manufacturing pharmaceuticals in the United States instead of in China and other places, and I certainly support that. But the trouble is that California is going to have to get approval from the FDA to manufacture insulin in their state, and no state has ever attempted to manufacture its own drugs, and so therefore the FDA has never even had the opportunity to rule on that. And we know how the FDA works. They don't always operate at warp speed. The other issue is that California, when they did their recent budget to try to support this, they appropriated $100 million to establish CalRx, and then so that's $50 million to establish it, $50 million toward developing their own insulin, which they were then going to try to market. And so that's going to have to be funded more going forward if they're successful in getting approval from the FDA. And so if they're successful, I think California could be a model for in-state manufacturing of insulin and other pharmaceuticals, but they're not there yet, and I feel like we may need to wait a year before we pursue this, just to see if we can learn from their process, because there's so many unknowns about it right now that I just don't know if we would be able to reach any conclusions that would help us.
Yeah. And if I may, I understand the concern, and I think in my hearing before said it would take a significant, it will be a significant investment. We know that, but I do think we have the right kind of industry, the right kind of universities, and the right medical facilities and research here that we could start. We could get ahead of California, basically, and I understand we would have to go through FDA, but I do think that Georgia is very ripe for starting this process.
Chairman Sessler. Number 3, got it.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, appreciate the senator's work on this, I understand. I don't read this to suggest that you're trying to establish a department of insulin manufacturing. You're contemplating the private sector delivering this, but it happening within our borders.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Correct.
Also appreciate the interest in this. Perhaps the lady's efforts are already more successful than you realize. I don't know if you realized this morning I was driving in, and I couldn't read the pop-up while driving, but Wall Street Journal this morning, Eli Lilly to cut insulin drugs by 70%. I don't know if you saw that this morning. So I don't know if California's actions talking about this or our actions talking about this is informing the actions of drug makers, but they're cutting their price by 70%.
And Eli Lilly is only one of 3 manufacturers of insulin right now.
Yeah. So my point is, if this is informing the private marketplace to cut, if one of the big players is cutting your price by 70%, I know there's others who I won't mention, but this is a timely issue. Appreciate your efforts on it. I would love to think we could manufacture private sector in Georgia, and glad to support your efforts. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Setzler. And I agree with you. This is our only bill, and I'm not going to drag this out, even make it more painful for the audience or people listening. But this is a study committee. If California did appropriate $50 million, I mean, the fact is that, the statistic, if I remember correctly, that they quote to bring a drug to market is like $1 billion. Now, do I think it would be $1 billion? Maybe not. Maybe it's more. But I didn't finish my sentence earlier, and it doesn't preclude us to work with California or to study this and to. I think that Chairman Setzler's idea of working within, the private community, that may be the issue to do it. And you know what? It may be that with discussion, we'll have other players come forward, and I don't think there's much downside to a study committee to look at this. That's sort of my perspective. Yep.
And Mr. Chairman, if we're manufacturing marijuana drugs here, I don't understand why we can't manufacture in some. So, just keeping it real.
I got you.
More money for us?
Yeah. I guess you. You might get a quote out of that one, Chairman Setzler. Chairman Huffstetler.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I just want to say that drinking coffee and trying to wake up this morning when you started talking, I thought I was back at Emory in school. But that was a very good synopsis of the issue. I know somebody's blood sugar and their HbA1c before I take them to the operating room. It's important. And I'm certainly not, the thing is, though, I'm no expert on manufacturing, so I'm a little bit clueless on this particular issue.
Yeah, admittedly too, and that's why we'll do the study committee and see if we can get some discussion going with it and see if other people are interested and see if there's a role there. Yes. Any further discussion? Make a motion to pass from Chairman Setzler, a second from Chairman Walker. All those in favor, let's raise our hand, right hand. All those in favor. Okay, it is unanimous. Okay, all right.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Senator Merritt. Meeting is adjourned.